The moment the lawyer's car pulled up to my old house, my daughter was on the front porch, smiling, holding a welcome home banner for herself. But the lawyer wasn't there to congratulate her. He was there to inform her that the house, her inheritance, had been bequeathed in its entirety to the nursing home aide who had held my hand for the last 6 months. Hi everyone. It's so good to be in this warm, safe space with you again. I'm Grandma Agnes. My name is Agnes Miller. I'm 79 years old, and I'm speaking to you today from a very comfortable armchair, in a room that is not the one I expected to spend my final years in. This is a story about a house, but it's also a story about what a home truly is. It's a secret I've kept, a final chapter to a painful book that even my own son doesn't fully understand. He knows his sister is no longer the heir to the family home. He thinks it was a last-minute, emotional decision made by a lonely old woman. He doesn't know that it was the clearest, most logical, and most liberating decision of my entire life. To tell this story feels like finally drawing back the curtains and letting the sunlight expose the truth that has been hiding in the shadows. Before I do, your support always gives me the strength I need. If you could be so kind as to like this video and subscribe to our channel, it reminds me that a quiet voice telling a true story can be a powerful thing. And today, my story is about the true meaning of power. My story begins, as all the best ones do, with love. It begins with my husband, my dear Robert. He was a history teacher, a man who believed that the past was not a dead thing, but a living presence that shaped our every moment. He saw stories everywhere, in every old building, every worn-out book, every line on an old woman's face. And this house was our favorite story. We bought it 50 years ago, a beautiful, rambling Victorian that was in a terrible state of disrepair. People thought we were crazy, but Robert saw its soul. He saw the ghosts of the families who had lived here, the children who had slid down its grand, sweeping banister, the secrets that were whispered in its parlors. "A house is an investment, Aggie," he used to say, his hands covered in paint and plaster dust. "It's a responsibility. We're not owners, we're caretakers. We're just the current chapter in its long, beautiful book." And for 45 years, we were the most dedicated caretakers you could ever imagine. We poured our life, our love, and every spare penny we had into bringing this old house back to its former glory. Robert, with his historian's eye, restored the original woodwork. I spent years tending the gardens, bringing the beautiful, overgrown grounds back to life. We raised our 2 children, our son, Mark, and our daughter, Elizabeth, within these walls. The house was not just where we lived. It was a member of our family. It was our life's great work, a physical manifestation of our love and our belief in the power of the past. Our son, Mark, grew up to be just like his father, a kind, gentle soul with a deep respect for history and a quiet, steady nature. He understood the heart of the house. He would help his father with restoration projects, his brow furrowed in concentration, learning the stories held within the wood and stone. Elizabeth, my daughter, she was another story. She was a whirlwind of modern ambition. She was beautiful, brilliant, and possessed a kind of relentless, forward-facing energy that had no patience for the past. To her, our beloved, history-filled home was not a story to be cherished, but a problem to be solved. She saw the high ceilings not as elegant, but as inefficient to heat. She saw the original wavy glass windows not as beautiful, but as drafty. She saw our life's work not as a legacy, but as an asset, a very valuable and very illiquid asset. From the time she was a teenager, she talked about the house in terms of its market value. "Do you know what a house like this, in this neighborhood, would be worth if you just updated the kitchen?" she'd ask, her eyes gleaming with a kind of acquisitive energy that always made my heart sink a little. My Robert, bless his patient, professorial heart, would just smile. "Lizzie, my dear," he'd say, "its worth cannot be measured in dollars. It is measured in the 50 years of love we have poured into it." "Meow, on." She would just roll her eyes, a gesture of fond, but utter, dismissal. We were her sweet, sentimental, and financially naive old parents. When Robert passed away 6 years ago, from a quiet, gentle fading of his heart, he died right here in this house, in his favorite reading chair in the library. His loss was an amputation of my very soul. And the house became my sanctuary, my fortress, my last living connection to the man I had loved for half a century. I could still hear the echo of his footsteps on the stairs, still smell the faint scent of his books in the library. I was a widow, but I was not alone. I had the house. But to Elizabeth, my husband's death was not just a tragedy. It was a business opportunity. The house was no longer co-owned by the sentimental old professor. It was now solely in the hands of his grieving, and presumably vulnerable, widow. Her visits, which had been infrequent, suddenly became a weekly ritual. She would arrive with her husband, a slick, ambitious real estate developer named Alan, and they wouldn't visit with me. They would tour the house. They would walk through the rooms, talking in low, urgent whispers, pointing out things that needed to be fixed and updated. They weren't comforting a grieving mother. They were assessing their inheritance. "Mother," Elizabeth would say, her voice a careful blend of loving concern and steely practicality. "This house is just too much for you. The stairs, the garden, the upkeep. You must be rattling around in this huge place all by yourself. It's a burden." A burden. The word was a weapon, and she wielded it with surgical precision. She was trying to convince me that my sanctuary was my prison, that my comfort was a chore. "I'm not rattling, dear," I'd say, my voice quiet but firm. "I'm living. This is my home." But she was relentless. She and Alan began a slow, insidious campaign to paint me as a frail, incompetent old woman who was a danger to herself. It started with small things. They'd hire a gardening service without asking me, telling me I shouldn't be exerting myself. They'd sign me up for a meal delivery service, insisting that I shouldn't have to worry about cooking. Every gesture of help was a subtle stripping away of my independence, a quiet chipping away at my confidence. They were building a narrative, for me and for the rest of the family, that I was no longer capable of being the caretaker of my own life, let alone the caretaker of this grand old house. My son, Mark, who lived a few hours away, saw what was happening, but he was powerless to stop it. He was a quiet man, like his father, and he hated confrontation. He would call me, his voice tight with a helpless anger. "Mom, don't let her push you around. It's your house. Dad would want you to stay there forever." But Elizabeth was a force of nature. She was so convinced of her own righteousness, so certain that her modern practical vision was superior to my sentimental historical one, that she saw her own greed as a form of love. She truly believed that she was helping me by trying to take my home away from me. The final act of this quiet, brutal drama began, as it so often does, with a simple fall. The fall itself was nothing. I was reaching for a book on a high shelf in the library, a foolish, prideful act of a woman who refuses to admit she's not as steady as she used to be. I missed the step, stumbled, and landed hard on my hip. The pain was sharp and immediate, a hot flash of white light. But the real injury was not to my bone. It was to my independence. That fall was the smoking gun Elizabeth had been waiting for. It was the final, irrefutable piece of evidence in the case she had been building against me for years, the case for my own incompetence. I tried to downplay it. The doctor said it was just a bad bruise, no break, but that I'd need to be on crutches for a few weeks and take it easy. But to hear Elizabeth tell it, I had narrowly escaped death. She and Alan descended upon the house with the grim, efficient energy of a disaster response team. "Mother, this is it," Elizabeth announced, her voice leaving no room for argument. She was not asking, she was telling. "You cannot stay here alone anymore. It is not safe. We could have lost you." She made it sound like an act of love, a desperate plea from a terrified daughter. But I heard the triumphant note of victory in her voice. The long siege was over. The fortress had finally been breached. Before I could even protest, she had a plan. A beautiful, sensible, and utterly ruthless plan. "You'll come and stay with us for a while, of course," she said. "But our guest room is so small. and it's up a flight of stairs. It's not practical for your recovery. So, Alan and I have found the perfect solution. Nice. The perfect solution was a place called The Willows. It was, on paper, the finest assisted living facility in the state. The brochure she produced showed a beautiful resort-like building with smiling, active seniors, a golf course, and a 5-star dining room. "It's just for a little while, Mother," she said, her voice a smooth, reassuring purr. "Just a short-term respite stay, while you recover. It has the best physical therapy department. You'll be back on your feet in no time. And while you're there, safe and sound, Alan and I will stay at the house. We'll take care of everything. We can do some of those little updates you've been needing. Fix the drafty windows. Maybe put a walk-in shower in your bathroom so this never happens again. Men. I saw the trap, clear as day. A short-term stay. A few little updates. It was a lie, beautifully wrapped in the paper of loving concern. If I left my house, if I surrendered my ground, I knew with a certainty that was a cold, hard stone in my gut that I would never be allowed to return. They would move in, they would renovate, and my respite stay would quietly, seamlessly become my permanent residence. My home would become theirs, and I would become a visitor, a guest, and then, finally, a distant memory. But I was in pain. I was on crutches. I felt old and weak and profoundly, deeply tired. The fight, for the first time in my life, had gone out of me. My son, Mark, fought for me. He drove down, his face a mask of fury. He argued with his sister in my own living room, their voices a terrible, echoing battle in the house that had once been filled with love. "You're railroading her, Lizzie," he'd shouted. "She's not an invalid. She just bruised her hip. She belongs in her own home." "Ah. And what are you going to do, Mark?" Elizabeth had shot back, her voice like ice. "Are you going to move in and take care of her? Are you going to be here to pick her up if she falls again?" "No. I didn't think so. Alan and I are the ones who are here. We are the ones taking responsibility, and this is what is best for her." She was so logical, so practical, so utterly devoid of a soul. And in the end, her relentless, practical cruelty won. I was too tired to fight them both. So, I agreed. I let them pack a small bag for me. I let them drive me to the Willows. As I looked back at my beautiful beloved house, seeing Alan's smug, triumphant face in the rearview mirror, I felt like I was attending my own funeral. The Willows was, just as the brochure had promised, a beautiful place. It was also the loneliest, most soul-crushing place I have ever been. It was a gilded cage, filled with other quiet, sad, and carefully managed old people. We were all residents of a waiting room, politely and comfortably waiting to die. The staff was professional and distant. The food was bland and tasteless. The days were a long, monotonous desert of organized activities I had no interest in. And my daughter, my loving, concerned daughter, she barely visited. In the first week, she came twice, her visits short and distracted, her phone buzzing constantly. She would give me cheerful, vague updates on the UP updates at the house. "The new windows are in, Mother. It's so much warmer already. The contractor started on your bathroom. You're going to love the new shower. It's so safe." She wasn't making my house safer for me. She was making it more marketable for them. After that first week, the visits dwindled to one, then to none. She was too busy. The renovations were a huge project. She had to manage the contractors. She would call, her voice always a little rushed, a little guilty. She was a woman who was trying to convince herself that the terrible thing she was doing was actually an act of love. I was alone, utterly and completely alone, in a beautiful, expensive prison my own daughter had put me in. The other residents were kind, but they were lost in their own worlds of grief and fading memories. I would sit in my quiet, beige room for hours, staring out the window, feeling the vibrant, colorful life I had lived slowly draining out of me. The only flicker of light in that long gray tunnel was a young woman named Sarah. Sarah was a nursing aide. She wasn't a registered nurse with a fancy degree. She was a young single mother, working 2 jobs to make ends meet. She was the one who did the real work. The hard, unglamorous, and profoundly human work. She was the one who helped me get dressed in the morning when my hip was too stiff. She was the one who would sit with me for a few extra minutes after her shift was over, just to listen. She wasn't paid to listen, but she did. She was a quiet, gentle soul, with eyes that held a deep, weary kindness. She saw me. Not as a resident, not as a case file, not as a lonely old woman. She saw me as a person. She would ask me about the house. "Tell me about your garden, Agnes," she'd say, while she was helping me with my compression stockings. And my face would light up, and I would tell her about Robert, about the roses, about the big oak tree. She was the only person who ever asked. She would bring me little things. A pretty leaf she'd found on her walk to the bus stop. A cookie her own little boy had decorated. Small, simple, and priceless gifts. One day, I was feeling particularly low. A wave of despair, so thick and black I could barely breathe, had washed over me. I hadn't heard from Elizabeth in over a week. I felt discarded, forgotten, a piece of old furniture that had been put into storage. Sarah came into my room at the end of her shift. She took one look at my face, and she didn't say a word. She just pulled up a chair. She took my old, wrinkled, trembling hand in her own, young, strong, and she just sat with me. In the silence. We sat there for nearly an hour. She didn't have to be there. She had her own child to get home to, her own tired life to live. But she stayed. She held my hand. And she was just present. Her quiet, selfless act of simple human kindness was a lifeline. It was an anchor in the storm of my loneliness. In that quiet, shared silence, a new idea began to form in my mind. A wild, audacious, and deeply, profoundly just idea. My husband had called our house a responsibility, a story to be cared for. For months, I had been in despair, believing that the story of our house was about to have a terrible, tragic ending. That it would fall into the hands of people who saw it only as an asset, who would strip it of its history and its soul. But as I sat there, holding Sarah's hand, I realized I was wrong. I was still the author of this story. I was still the caretaker. And I could choose the next chapter. I could choose the next caretaker. A home, I realized, is not about blood. It is not about inheritance. It is about care. It is about who shows up, who holds your hand in the dark, who sees you as a person, not a problem. And in that moment, I knew. I knew who the rightful heir to my house was. It was not the daughter of my body who had put me in this cage and forgotten me. It was the daughter of my heart, the quiet, kind, and selfless young woman who was holding my hand, who saw my value, and who had, without even knowing it, given me back my own home by reminding me of what a home truly is. The decision was made. The thorn of my grief was gone, replaced by the steel of a new purpose. My daughter thought she had won. She thought the house was hers. She had no idea that she had already lost it, in a quiet beige room, with a simple, selfless act of holding a lonely old woman's hand. The moment that decision crystallized in my mind, the entire world shifted. The gray, suffocating fog of despair that had filled my room for months burned away, replaced by the bright, clean light of a singular, powerful purpose. I was no longer a victim. I was no longer a lonely, discarded old woman. I was a woman with a plan. A quiet, legal, and exquisitely just plan. The next morning, when the bland breakfast was delivered to my room, I did not just pick at it. I ate every bite. I needed my strength. After breakfast, I used the phone in the common room. My first call was to my son, Mark Doddle. "Mark, darling," I said, my voice cheerful and clear for the first time in months. "I need you to do something for me. I need you to contact my lawyer, Mr. Davison. I need to make some changes to my will." There was a stunned silence on the other end of the line. "The will," Mom, are you okay? What's going on? I've never been better, dear, I said. I'm just gaining some clarity on things. Will you please make the call for me? I'll need him to come here, to the Willows, as soon as possible. My second call was to my financial advisor. I had him send me the full, detailed accounting of my estate. The value of the house, the stocks Robert had left me, the savings. The number was considerable. I had been a careful steward of my husband's legacy. Mr. Davison, our family lawyer for 40 years, arrived the next day. He was a kind man, a friend of Robert's, and he looked at me with a deep, pitying sadness. He thought he was coming to see a frail old woman making a rash, emotional decision in her grief. He was wrong. He was coming to see a queen, quietly and deliberately rearranging the lines of succession to her kingdom. We sat in the sterile, sun-filled visiting room at the Willows. I laid out my plan for him. I was calm. I was lucid. I was utterly, unshakably certain. I want to amend my will, I said. I want to leave my entire estate, the house, the contents, the investments, everything, to one person, a young woman named Sarah Jenkins. Mr. Davison's jaw dropped. Sarah Jenkins, the nursing aide? He knew her, of course. She had brought us our tea. Agnes, are you sure? This is highly irregular. What about Elizabeth? And Mark? No? Mark will be fine, I said. He has his father's heart and a good life of his own. And Elizabeth has made her choice. She has chosen the house over her mother. So I am choosing to give the house to someone who has shown me what it means to be a daughter, without any expectation of reward. I explained everything, not the emotional, messy parts. Just the facts. The campaign of disrespect. The fall. The way they had manipulated me into this place, and then abandoned me. And then I told him about Sarah. About her quiet, selfless kindness. About the way she had held my hand. Robert always said we were caretakers, not owners, I told him, my voice thick with the memory of my husband's wisdom. I am simply choosing the next caretaker, a person who understands that the value of a house is not in its market price, but in the love that fills it. Sarah is a good, kind, hard-working young woman. She and her little boy deserve a foundation. They deserve a home. My home. My home. Mr. Davison listened, his expression slowly changing from one of pity to one of profound, dawning respect. He was a man of the law, but he was also a man of justice. He understood. He drew up the new will that very week. I signed it in the same sun-filled visiting room, with 2 nurses from another floor as witnesses. The document was ironclad. It was the last will and testament of a woman who was of sound mind and clear purpose. It was my final, most important act as the caretaker of Robert's legacy. And then, I waited. I didn't tell a soul. I didn't tell Sarah. I didn't want to burden her with the knowledge to change the simple, genuine kindness she showed me every day. I didn't tell Mark. I didn't want to put him in the middle of the firestorm that was to come. And I certainly didn't tell Elizabeth. I let her continue with her grand plan. I would listen to her cheerful, infrequent phone calls, her breathless updates about the renovations. Mother, you wouldn't believe the new kitchen. It's all white marble and stainless steel. It's added so much value. We've had the big oak tree pruned. It really opens up the yard. You'll love it. I would just make quiet, assenting noises, my heart a cold, hard stone in my chest. You are polishing my house for its new owner, my dear. I would think. How very thoughtful of you. Ooh. The 6 months of my respite stay came and went. The house was finished. My hip was long since healed. And the time had come for Elizabeth and Alan to make their final move. Elizabeth came to visit me. It was the first time I had seen her in person in over a month. She was wearing a new, expensive-looking suit, and she had the air of a busy, important executive. She sat opposite me, her face a mask of loving, dutiful concern. She told me how well I looked. She told me how happy she was that my recovery had been so successful. And then she delivered the final, gentle, and utterly devastating blow. "Mother," she began, her voice soft and reasonable. "We've been talking. And Alan and I, and Mark too, we all feel that you are just thriving here at the Willows. You're safe. You're cared for. You have a community. And the house, well, it's just too much for you. We've made it so beautiful, so modern. But it's a young person's house now. So, we've decided the best thing for everyone is for you to stay here. Permanently. And Alan and I, we will move into the house. We will be the new caretakers." Well, she had finally said it. The lie of the short-term stay was over. The verdict had been delivered. I had been sentenced to life in this beautiful, beige prison. This was the moment she expected me to cry, to protest, to be a difficult, emotional old woman. I did none of those things. I just looked at her, and I smiled. A quiet, serene, and deeply pitying smile. "If that's what you think is best, dear," I said, my voice a soft whisper, "you've worked so hard on the house. You deserve to be happy there." The relief on her face was so profound it was almost comical. She had been prepared for a fight, and instead, she had been met with a quiet, easy surrender. She thought she had won. "Oh, Mother, thank you," she said, her voice gushing with a gratitude that was purely for herself. "Thank you for being so understanding. We'll come and visit you every single week, I promise." "I know you will, dear," I said. My fight back was not in that room. My fight back was a legal document, sitting in a safe in my lawyer's office. My fight back was a quiet, ticking time bomb, set to go off at the precise moment of her greatest triumph. The following Monday was her moving day. I knew because she had sent me a text message with a picture of a moving van in the driveway. A little exclamation point of her victory. "Moving day! So exciting! We'll come see you on Sunday. XOXO. I waited. I watched the clock in my room. I pictured them, carrying their boxes into my house, arranging their new, modern furniture, celebrating their victory. At precisely 3 o'clock in the afternoon, when I knew they would be in the thick of it, I made my final call. To Mr. Davison, my lawyer. "It's time," I said. He knew exactly what I meant. He got in his car and drove to my old house. He walked up the stone path that Robert had laid, past the rose bushes I had tended. He found my daughter on the front porch. She was, he told me later, directing the movers, a glass of champagne in her hand, her face flushed with the triumphant joy of a queen taking possession of her new castle. She saw the lawyer, a man she had known her whole life, and she smiled, assuming he was there to drop off some final papers for her to sign, a final transfer of her mother's assets. He walked up the steps. He did not smile back. He just handed her a crisp, legal envelope. "Elizabeth," he said, his voice calm, formal, and utterly devoid of warmth. "I'm afraid there has been a significant change in the disposition of this property. Your mother amended her will 2 months ago. You are no longer the beneficiary. The house, and its entire contents, now belong to a Miss Sarah Jenkins. As of the moment of your mother's passing, this will be Sarah's home." And then, he delivered the final, most exquisite, and most devastating blow. "However," he continued, "your mother, in her generosity, has made one final provision. She has instructed me to inform you that you are, of course, welcome to stay in the house. You can live here for as long as you like. Under one condition, you will pay market rate rent every month directly to the new owner, Sarah Jenkins." The champagne glass slipped from her fingers and shattered on the stone steps. The symbolism was so perfect, it was almost poetic. Her beautiful, triumphant celebration had just been smashed into 1,000 pieces. To be a tenant in her own inheritance. To pay rent to a nursing home aide for the privilege of living in the house she had stolen. It was a checkmate of such beautiful, brutal genius. It could have only been devised in the quiet, lonely, thinking hours of a retirement home. The aftermath was a quiet, swift, and total collapse of my daughter's carefully constructed world. She and Alan did not, of course, stay and pay rent to Sarah. Their pride, the very thing that had fueled their cruelty, would never allow it. They moved out that very week, their new furniture and their shattered ambitions packed into the same moving van that had brought them there in such triumph. Their marriage, I heard, did not survive the fallout. A partnership built on the shared goal of a future inheritance apparently doesn't have much of a foundation when that inheritance is suddenly, publicly, and humiliatingly snatched away. Alan, the ambitious real estate developer, had not married a wealthy heiress after all. He had married a woman who had been disinherited in favor of a nursing home aide. The shame of it was too much for their fragile, transactional love. My son, Mark, was stunned, but he understood. When I finally told him the whole story, the quiet daily humiliations, the way his sister had tried to erase me, he just nodded, his face a sad mask of resignation. Dad always said Lizzie valued the price of things, but never the cost, he said. I guess she finally got the bill. And Sarah? Oh, my sweet Sarah. That was the most beautiful part of this whole sad story. Mr. Davison and I went to the nursing home together to tell her. She was in the staff break room, eating a sandwich, her face tired from a long shift. When we told her that she was the sole heir to my entire estate, that my beautiful grand Victorian house was now hers, she just stared at us. She didn't understand. She thought it was a joke or a cruel trick. But why? She whispered, tears welling in her eyes. I didn't do anything. You did everything, Sarah, I said, taking her hand, the same hand that had held mine in the dark. You did the most important thing in the world. You were kind. You showed up. You treated a lonely old woman like a human being. My husband and I were just the caretakers of that house. And now you and your little boy. Go and be happy there. Fill it with love. That's all we ever wanted. She did. She and her son moved into the house. And it is, I am told, a home again. It is filled with the sound of a child's laughter sliding down the grand banister. Sarah hosts a free weekly dinner there for other single mothers from the community. She has turned my house not into an asset, but into a sanctuary, a safe harbor, just as my Robert always intended. She is the best caretaker we could have ever dreamed of. I, of course, did not stay at the Willows. The day the will was signed, I checked myself out. I used a portion of my own savings to buy a small, beautiful condominium in a community I chose, on my own terms. It is my home. It is quiet, and it is safe, and it is mine. Sarah and her son come to visit me every Sunday. She brings me cookies. She holds my hand. She is the daughter of my heart. The lesson I learned, the one that was forged in the fire of this great betrayal, is a simple one. Family is not always about blood. It is about love. It is about respect. It is about who shows up for you when you are at your lowest. A child born of your body can be a stranger, and a stranger can, through a simple act of selfless kindness, become your child. Do not ever be afraid to rewrite your own story, especially the ending. Your legacy, your home, your life's work, it is not a birthright to be claimed. It is a gift. And you, and only you, get to decide who is worthy of receiving it. Choose the person who values the gift, not the one who is just waiting to unwrap the box. Thank you for allowing me to share this final chapter with you. It feels good to know that the story of my house is, finally, in the right hands. If my story has touched you, I would be so very grateful if you would like this video and subscribe to our channel. And please, don't forget to ring that notification bell so we don't miss our next story time together. The comments are a place where we can all be caretakers for each other. So please, if you feel so moved, share a story about a kindness from a stranger that changed your life. Love you all. This is Grandma Agnes, and I'll see you in the next story.